Okay, looks like we're cooking here. Um, Apologies for the technical difficulties, but eventually, if I do enough of these streams, we will get it right. I'm Stephen Reichert. For those of you who don't know me, we are raising heritage hogs on pasture the old-fashioned way, the hard way here in Western New Hampshire, where it is a balmy 20-something degrees and we're getting dumped on with snow tonight. And figured I would do this live stream because there was an issue that I wanted to discuss, something that's been weighing on my mind since our New Year's live stream, which this is not going to be another 3 hour knockdown drag out. So for those of you who suffered through that, I appreciate it. And for anybody who is watching this after the fact, or if you're new to this channel, our goal here is to make America farmers again, and that means taking small practical steps towards that, and that's literally what we're going to be digging into tonight, is kind of the idea of, farming and homesteading. Is this just some ideal that is put upon us in memes on Pinterest and Instagram, where we see all the posts about the sourdough and people living these outlandish lifestyles that, in practical terms, when you're not there, like getting from here to there, it's a real heavy lift. And I know that there is reasonable concern, just given the nature of things in our society. Even like 6 months ago, before we were at war and everything was kind of coming unglued, I know there was reasonable amounts of concern with devaluation of the dollar and the real estate market. And one of the questions that I got specifically that led me to doing this stream was the question that I got for the New Year's Eve stream that we did a couple days ago, about kind of getting started and how to go about that in practical terms. And this is a conversation that I've had with a friend of mine. We'll call him Arthur, friend that I've been friends with since I was a little kid. And we've kind of grown up together, and we have very similar perspectives on some things. We talk a lot. And then there's some things that we have very different perspectives on. And so we kind of compare ideas. And the other day he said to me, I don't really know what's left for the folks under 30, under 35, too bad for them. Like, they're kind of screwed. And it got me thinking about, I know that thought process, I know that idea is fairly prevalent. And with the whole Blackpill and there's different pills, I guess. Everybody's got different ways of conceptualizing this. And there's a lot of content creators on YouTube and other platforms that are making hay out of the idea that everything is hopeless, and so we can use that to justify a complete depredation and kind of heading in a downward path and just trying to do things to benefit ourselves, and kind of throwing all social conventions and norms and established tradition to the wind, because, hey, that ship sailed, and if that stuff had been working, then we wouldn't be in this position. But the fact that we're here means that, anything goes, and I'm just going to get mine at everybody else's expense, and that's just going to be the way that it is. That's roughly my interpretation of black pill and some of the red pill and some of those other pills. And again, I might have some of the details a little bit off, and some of you might want to argue with me in the comments or chat about the semantics of this stuff. But basically, let's just say, for lack of a better term, glass half full versus glass half empty. And I'm somewhere in between, because I'm certainly not a idealist in terms of, looking at the situation. I'm not going to blow smoke up anybody's rear end and say, oh yeah, this is, you just have to have a positive mental attitude and everything's going to be fine. But at the same time, I personally wholeheartedly reject the idea that it is impossible, or that we should just say, too bad, so sad, sucks to be you. Like, it's that ship has sailed. Because at every point in history, people are always faced with challenges that are unprecedented. I mean, putting ourselves back in the colonial period, and without going into the political ramifications of all of that, that some people who are not myself might have with the period of colonization and some of the stuff that came with that, that was a period where, again, people lived in towns and then they got kind of crowded out by businesses and by regulations and other things where they felt kind of boxed in. And then it was like, okay, well, now we have to go somewhere else. And then going out into the wild, it wasn't a cream puff. You had to go out there and put literally your physical person at risk, because you had all kinds of things, not just from attacks from Indians, but you also had the fact that, you were putting yourself physically beyond the logistical support of people, because you want to get away from the businesses, you want to get away from the government, the regulation, the encroachment of neighbors and villages, and all the kind of the negative stuff that those bring with them. But then you also kind of lose out on the convenience and the safety and the benefits that go with that. So there was a tremendous amount of unknown and similar types of obstacles that people could have looked at in those day and age and use those then, just as now, as reasons or obstacles, and say, hey, you know what, it's cooked, we're not even going to bother, we're just going to stay here and just go along with whatever the British want to give us, and we'll let them bring their stuff in on ships, and we're just going to kind of stay put here and leave it at that, because who wants to go out there and stick their neck out? And I'm not a huge Jordan Peterson fan, but one of the things back before he completely old Jordan Peterson, back before he got involved with the Daily Wire, I think he had some better takes on adventure and masculinity and what was necessary for people. And I think that his idea about adventure and facing the unknown as being an important ingredient in life, I think cannot be overstated. And I've mentioned a handful of times on this channel that a little bit about my own background as a rock climber, not because I ever was any superb athlete or really accomplished anything other than, doing a 365-day climbing project, which was really just a slow grind that was made somewhat remarkable based on the fact that I have type 1 diabetes. But ultimately, I never made any significant impact as an athlete. But for me, climbing was a vehicle, a way to embrace and interact with adventure. And adventure is not strictly, adrenaline junkie type of behavior. Adventure is really a scenario where the outcome or the end of a matter is indeterminate, where we don't know how it's going to turn out. It could go one way, it could go the other way. It is discomfort. And there is an element of what we're doing, whether it's farming, homesteading, however you want to quantify it, whatever label you want to put on it, where you have to be comfortable with that and you have to love suffering, because hanging in that balance where you don't know whether things are going to go your way or they're going to go another way, or they could go a third or fourth way that you hadn't even anticipated to begin with, you have to be comfortable with the fact that, yeah, I could do everything right and things could still go poorly. I could do everything right and my animals could still get sick, or maybe they'll have a bad litter, or they have a great litter and then mom steps on all the babies. Or maybe, buyers bail on me because something comes up in their life, even though I did everything right on my end, and I'm left holding the bag and paying for feed for animals that I was supposed to have sold. That is the concept of adventure. And I think now more than ever, it's important to change perspective in terms of the way that we're looking at things being cooked, and recognize that a certain amount of cookery is inherent in every situation throughout all of time. And it's a choice to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to climb that mountain. I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to shoulder this burden, and I'm going to walk up that hill, and I'm going to take it as far as I can, and I'm going to do what I can with it. And that is overall my general philosophy. And I welcome any pushback, any comments that you guys have about that, because this is kind of my jumping off point, which is into some of the more practical components about what maybe some of the younger generations are lacking that some of the older generations may have an overabundance of but have failed to share, and how we can bridge that gap through community and build some meaningful bridges that actually can change things. And at the end of the day, if you're hearing this and you're seeing this, then it's up to you to put some of this stuff to work. And I'll give you a couple of case studies, or call it examples, from what I have experienced in my own life. And so the first thing that I would start off by saying is that you got to go from 0 to 1. And the idea of comparing what you're doing to what you've seen in a meme or on somebody else's YouTube channel, I think is a little bit self-defeating. It's self-limiting. And rather than saying, okay, I need to own a property and the property needs to look like this and it needs to produce X, Y, and Z, I think being able to say, I'm going to start from where I'm at and I'm going to do something. And for you, depending on where you're at, that might mean taking a couple of 5-gallon buckets and growing some tomatoes, or growing some, a little vegetable garden on your patio, because that's all you can do right now. It may mean finding a farm that you can volunteer at and that you can participate and become a help, so that you can learn stuff and you can develop some connections within a community and actually get a feel for what you're doing, and also get some of the benefits of produced food that is local to you, but without necessarily owning the land. Because I can tell you, one of the things that I struggle with the most is the fact that, like, I'm trying to expand my herd with my animals here, and it's really, really hard. Like, if I had an extra pair of hands and there was somebody who wanted to help me out, granted, yeah, I can't necessarily pay a ton of money because the cash flow in farming is very limited, especially at certain times and especially where I'm at in my business. But being able to have somebody who could come alongside and be an extra set of hands who's interested in this, I think is a really significant thing that farmers benefit from and really need. So I want to tell you briefly, and then I'm going to get to some of the comments here. I see Chris is in the chat. One of the stories that I think really got me thinking about this stuff is how my wife and I wound up with this farm that we have today. And being perfectly candid, I really had not had any realistic dreams of land ownership until she and I got married, because what I had been doing up till that point on my own was much more freelance and flying by the seat of my pants. And I enjoyed that, but I understood that not being able to have some of the financial security necessary to own land was kind of built into that, and that was part of what I had accepted as being my life. And then when she and I got together and things changed substantially in terms of the outlook and what we were trying to do together versus what I had been trying to do prior, it got me to thinking very differently about some of this stuff. And we literally figuratively, I guess, got on the last chopper out of Saigon, because we got set up with this place right as the market completely exploded and interest rates went off the rails and all the prices of real estate went completely crazy. However, we went through, looked through a bunch of different places, and everything up here in New England that we were looking at, there was places with nice houses, which she found very appealing, more so than I did. I mean, I like a nice house, but I really wanted to have land and a barn, some outbuildings. There's one place that had 40 acres, beautiful barn. It had a shooting range. I was like, and there was like no zoning, no neighbors, but the house was an absolute dump. And of course, I was doing my very best to twist her arm and telling her, listen, babe, like, we can fix it up. It'll be fine. Unfortunately, she had the good sense to not listen and to, push back on that, which is the value of somebody who sees the same vision that you have, but is able to take an opposite perspective that you can trust. Very, very important, as I learned. And then there were places that she liked where there was like a postage stamp size piece of land, but the house was beautiful and new. And then I had to say, nah, sorry, I got to pull the ripcord on this one. This is not gonna, like, we can't even raise chickens on this property. And we finally settled on a place where it was smaller than either of us really liked, and the house had some things that we liked and some things we didn't like, but we kind of got tired of looking. And there was a place that was pretty good, and it was just one of these like compromises where nobody was happy. And so it seemed like, okay, this is going to be good. And we tried to see this place, and a realtor got us to the house. And then the realtor was like, yeah, I can't get the key. The key won't open the door. And so we were like, well, you know what? We're going to go back to New York and we'll just kind of forget it. And so we get on the highway, we turn around, we're kind of, moping a little bit because, we were disappointed because we thought that we finally reached something that we could all agree on, and it was good enough for government work, and we were going to move on. And we're just pulling on the highway to start heading south, and realtor shoots me a text message. Hey, I was able to talk to the listing realtor, and she has the key, and if you guys can wait till tomorrow, you guys can come back out and you can look at the place. And so wife and I are like, yeah, okay, fine. One more day. What the heck? We'll do it. So we turned back around, got right off the exit, checked back into the motel. What's one more night? And as with most of the great decisions that have happened in my life, nature called, and I was on the can and just opening up the realtor.com app, and I saw this place pop up, and I saw the aerial photos, I saw the price, I saw the size of the land, and I saw that the house was not in complete ruin. And I was like, this has to be it. And texted the realtor, showed my wife. And to make a long story excruciating, the point of this is that when we got there the next day, because the next day we got to see the original property that we had been looking at, but then we also came to look at this place that we wound up going with. When we pulled in to look at this place, the gentleman who owned this property and who had developed this property from just, scrub wilderness into a farm, he was here, and I looked around and I was impressed. I loved what he had done, and you could see the love and the care that he had put into this place. You could see the heart that had gone into building this. And I told him, I said, I love what you did here, and we want to raise a family, and we want to farm here. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try, and that's what I want to do. And I know that he got another offer on the place the same day, but I can promise you that he could have made easily an extra $100,000 to $200,000 on this property if he had just taken a different offer or just said, nah, I want more. Because what this property, what he sold it to us for, was very, very, very reasonable compared to what it could have been sold for. And I know that even having talked to him after the fact, because we remained friends after he sold us the place, he appreciated the fact that all of the decades that he put in here and the work that he put in to make this a farm, he wanted to see that carried on by people who shared that passion and that love for growing your own food and raising a family and the traditional farming culture, even though, like, we were a couple of clowns from New York who were coming in and saying, hey, we're going to do the best we can. And he said, hey, good for you. I want to help. And he could have easily sold it for beaucoup dinero. And instead he said, you know what? If you guys can do this, like, let's make it happen. And he worked with me, kind of a little off the books deal, to throw in the butcher shop. And so we got a farm with a butcher shop and a barn, 10 acres, a neighbor who's pretty colorful and interesting and who kind of hates me, but he means well. So he's a good guy. He's kind of a hard-boiled New England guy. But that's beside the point. So the point of what I'm getting at here is that there is a desire from boomers, previous generations, to give some of what they have built. And there's kind of this negative idea that like the boomers, the oldsters, they've kind of done all this stuff and they've had their fun, and now there's nothing left for the younger generation, and it's just everything's going to hell in a handcart, so why even bother? And so instead we're just going to sit and, you know, play with ourselves and sit on, you know, doom scrolling on the phone all day, when in reality I think that getting oneself prepared and making yourself the kind of person who is ready to suffer and start undertaking the process of learning the hard way with some animals on the ground, or with some gardens and some buckets with some tomatoes in them, whatever it is that you got to do. But to take those little steps to prepare for that stuff, so that when you encounter somebody who wants to find a way to pass that torch, because I believe there are a lot of people in that situation. There's a lot of farms around here that are owned by older folks where they're too old to physically do the work. There's no money in it for them. They can't, you know, make that happen. And I feel, I mean, I've talked to a lot of them as well. And the right person who comes along and says, hey, I have a sincere desire to do this. Let me show you the plan. Let me tell you what I'm thinking. I have a passion for doing this. I want to take what you've done. I want to lease it. I want to rent a little bit. Let's make that happen. That there's a lot more openness and willingness to do that kind of thing. And that can be a really valuable way to get a foot on the ladder and build a little bit of community, rather than just saying, too bad, it can't happen. And where those relationships can go and where that can grow and what that can grow into is, don't shortchange that. So I'm going to get to some of the comments because I've been blathering on here and I want to see what you guys are saying. So Chris said the younger generation or two have been told they can be anything they want to be, not what they should achieve, which instead of being an inspiration has instead left them more adrift and lost. Absolutely. The thing that I was encountering back when I went, this is around like 2012, when I went through my, like, I'm going to be a, rock climbing photojournalist. And I was like, I did all the things that I set out to do, but I found that, like, follow your passion. That was the big thing. Follow your passion. It was just, this romantic, imagery. And the reality is, when you follow your passion, if there's not some value in it where you're doing something that makes other people's lives better, where it's not absolutely necessary and impactful to other people, then you might achieve what you want to do. You find your passion, and then it's like the dog that catches the car. Well, now what? And like you say, leaves you more adrift and lost. Instead of achieving and reaching higher, there's been stagnation and decay. Agreed. And I count myself in that group, just to be clear, says Chris. And I've been on kind of both sides of that, because I definitely bottomed out starting my own business and trying to be my other YouTube channel and kind of growing and being an influencer before that was a thing, and getting sponsorships and being, a brand ambassador for pharmaceutical companies. It was a whole thing. And it was like riding high. And then like a year later, it's like, oh yeah, we're not interested in that anymore. And then I'm sitting there like, okay, well, how am I going to pay my bills? And now I got to figure out who I am and what I'm going to be. And I'm trying to sell something that doesn't actually mean anything. And that's ultimately, it was that confrontation with reality that got me to go into medicine. And then that got me to go into farming. And now I'm kind of doing both of those things. Bolino's Bounty says, I'd say also, no one talks about farming as a career path or something you should be doing with your life, at least where I live. And Chris says there is now also a serious financial barrier to entry, which is not helped by national level laws. True. So farming as a career path, talking about farming as a career, I think this is just my impression. I'm going to kind of shoot from the hip here. I think it's a little dangerous with the idea of farming as a career, because if you're approaching farming as a way to make money principally, then that typically requires infrastructure and overhead that is pretty substantial. And typically that means being in bed with bank and then having big contracts that go out with big buyers, big producers. And there are pros and cons to doing that, because certainly, you go out to Iowa and there's guys with big dually diesel trucks and the big belt buckles, and that's all well and good. And they make a lot of money, but they also spend a lot of money, and the bank has them by the short and curlies. And that may be an option. I'm not the one to ask about that, because my approach to farming is sort of like a guerrilla operation, not like guerrilla, like monkey gorilla. I mean, like, clandestine warfare type of operational specs, where you approach it kind of from an end run, where you have some sort of career and you do this minimum viable farming in a way where it's super, super small, but it can still be profitable. And then you grow that seed diligently, just a little bit at a time, so that you can keep it profitable, and you avoid making big investments, big breakout growth opportunities. But you're building it a little bit at a time, until you get to the point where that snowball has grown and you have the momentum. And then you can put the hammer down a little bit more, because you've fleshed it out and you've expanded a market. And so you're operating all strictly on cash flow, rather than having, and you can grow that into something where you can make a decent income. But it's something that I would say you kind of have to do it in reverse order in order to make that a career. You have to think creatively about how you're going to do that. And that's something that I'm looking at here, because it's more than just selling bacon and pork chops. I have a very good friend who did the work for me on the barn, Kent. And, he's always like, oh man, you're so close. All you got to do, you got to get a few more pigs, and let's do the math here. Like, you can quit your job at the hospital and you can be a full-time farmer. And he's like all gung ho. And I'm always like trying to pump the brakes on him, because for me, I'm not looking to just put all of my eggs into the bacon basket and just sell pork. I'm looking at, well, how can I diversify what I'm doing so that I can, sell piglets, so that I can sell breed stock, so that I can do education, so that I can have a farm store, so that I can do half and whole pigs, so that I can do content, and have a variety of different things that I can do, so that it's not trying to, because in order to have a career producing animals, that's a lot. It's a lot of animals, because, it's a lot of animals that it takes to be able to maintain. And then you're operating at that scale where you got to get the scale right. Because if you have too many, then it's like the straw that broke the camel's back type of thing. All right. So moving along in the comments, Chris said about the serious financial barrier to entry, not helped by national level laws, and the financial hurdles, local zoning issues, Bellino's Bounty saying. And so, in terms of the local zoning laws, I think that's one of the reasons why, again, if, measure twice and cut once. So rather than going and buying a place and saying, I'm going to do this, that, or the other thing, look at farms that are already established, that are already zoned for this stuff, where you can say, hey, can I lease some of your land? Because you don't have to jump through those hoops. Somebody has already done all of those things, and that land is already zoned or assessed, and those hurdles have already been crossed. And all you have to do is just, hey, I'm going to take these pigs from, 2 months to 8 months, put them in the freezer, and then we'll see what we learned, and we'll go from there, and we'll try it again. I think what my goal, where we talk about make America farmers again, is to put this out there, not necessarily as a career path, but I mean, kind of a career path, not strictly just for the money, but to put it out there as a hobby is not really my choice. I know I have some friends that call what I do, hobby farms, or like I have a customer who's like, oh, it's a hobby farm, and I understand they mean no disrespect by that, but at the same time, the amount of money and effort and time that I have put into what I am doing, I wouldn't really call it a hobby. But at the same time, it's not paying my mortgage, so I don't know. It's a weird gray area, but I want to normalize the idea that this is something that should be done. Like, instead of going hunting and going fishing. I mean, I'm all for hunting and fishing. I think that stuff is really cool, but like, raise a couple of pigs, because like, if you can easily, a lot of people, I think, don't realize that they have the capacity to participate in farming on some level because it's just never entered their mind. And if they were to see something that where somebody was like, hey, start now, figure it out. Like, do you know somebody who's got a couple acres of property? Talk to them, ask them if you can like lease some of it or trade them some space on their property to put up a temporary fencing setup, in the spring, and then put a couple of piglets there, grow one out, give them one. They can have it butchered. You take the other one, and you get in the game. And when you have more people doing that, and then you're running up against some of the financial barriers, and you're running up against some of the regulatory hurdles. But part of the reason the regulatory hurdles are there is because we don't have enough young people who are taxpayers who are going to go to those meetings and say, excuse me, you're not going to tell me that I can't, have a couple of pigs on my property because I'm keeping them contained. They're not damaging anything. They're not hurting anybody else. I'm able to do what I want to do with my property, and you need to butt out, because here in the Northeast, it is a time-honored tradition of people moving in with money into rural areas where the local people don't have as much money because they are, or free time, because like out here in New Hampshire, like everybody owns their own business, and people are relatively, well, there's a decent amount of people that are financially independent, let's say. And then people come in from out of state where they have more money, and they say, oh, this is so nice. Wouldn't it be even nicer if we could just, stop all these yokels from using their chainsaws and having their chickens running around? And then all these laws come in. And to me, I think we are at a point where something approaching civil disobedience is, have you seen some of the protests that have been happening in Europe where they've been running their livestock down to, the government section of the cities? I think that we may be approaching a time where that is going to become necessary, but you got to have numbers on your side in order to effectively do that. And it's only when people realize exactly how grasping and covetous the regulatory ineptitude of out-of-state Karens has become, that they're going to be willing to push back and say, the hell with it. You know what? I want to get some pigs, if nothing else, just to be able to piss these people off and show them that, you can take our, our lives, but you're never going to take our bacon. Like, this is the smell of freedom out here. And I mean, I'm kind of being a little bit funny about that ish, but I'm also being kind of serious about that, where, people are looking for that hill to die on, but not literally, because we don't want a hot conflict. And we're approaching a situation where things are kind of, simmering and boiling. What better way to channel some of that tension and that energy into somewhat of, call it revolution, rebellion, but in a non-martial sense, where it's, hey, you know what? We're going to do this Amish style, and we're going to raise our animals, and we're going to show you what's up, and we're just going to grow our animals. And if you have a problem with it, we'll go on YouTube and we'll go on social media and we'll make you guys look like a bunch of dinguses because you guys have a problem with chickens and pigs. and people in an agricultural area wanting to just raise their own food as though that's some kind of a big ask and that we need to ask for your permission. And the reality is, it's just, we need to reset things. And the only way you kind of find the rules that need to be reset is by getting out there and doing it, and you see what you're bumping into, and then it's like, okay, here's the problem, let's get rid of that. Like for me, the USDA regulations have been the obvious big thing where I'm like, yeah, this needs to go. Absolutely needs to go. And that's one of the things that I talk about a lot on the channel when I get into ranting. I'll do a live stream ranting about that specifically, where I can really dig into that. Chris asks, have you ever heard of the farming game made by a farmer out of Yakima, Washington? The entire goal of the game is to be able to quit the day job and farm full time. It's a board game. Oh, interesting. No, I have not heard of that. I'm familiar with a couple of farming game like apps that are on the phone that I played with at one time very briefly, and it was kind of fun, but it was just like, it irritated me because I was like, why am I doing this on my phone? I need to go out and, clean out I got 2 litters of piglets that are like almost to the point where it's going to, well, definitely to the point where it's going to be unpleasant, more unpleasant than usual, having to castrate them. And, it always happens. I got right the time when I should have been doing all the castrating and weaning, which was over Christmas, and I was sick, and now I'm starting to get better, but I'm still not better. And it's like, now I need a hand doing this. And, I don't have the help doing stuff at the time when I need it. And it's, it's fun. So I have a hard time getting into some of the recreational components of farming, but there's some cool games. I mean, sometimes I actually go back and forth thinking about whether or not I would want to, because people ask me a lot of times at work at the hospital, maybe I'm a little too obvious and transparent with this, but I talk a lot about my farm, and it means a lot to me. It's very important to me. And they ask me, is that what you're trying to do full time? And I'm not sure that I would want to farm full time. I guess that's one of the things that I would want to impress on new farmers and the younger generation of farmers, is that in order to farming today doesn't necessarily have to look like farming. It's not Little House on the Prairie. And to a certain extent, even Little House on the Prairie, I think, did a good job of showing that, okay, Pa has to go work at the lumber mill, and that's what he does. He cuts lumber, and that's his day job. And he's still, here and there, he's got to take in the harvest and plant the field and plow and do some of that other stuff. But he's not just sitting around planting and harvesting constantly. He's got a day job, and he's got another thing that he does. And the farming is something that once you get it buttoned up, you have that momentum going, you're able to produce enough, and kind of roughly the numbers that you're working with, so that you can manage the risk of however much you have to put in to get the harvest out, or to get the yield out for whatever animals that you are raising or whatever crops that you have going on, that you're able to do that. And then you can still be productive in another area, but instead of having to work yourself to death in one job, you can work at a slightly laid back iteration of your day job, because that's not, you don't have your eggs all in that one basket, and you have a little bit coming in from what you're doing on the farm. And then again, it's a fallback option if everything completely hits the fan. Well, yeah, it's not going to be a good way that you're going to be able to survive the rest of your life, but if things kind of hit the skids, hey, yeah, I would rather have a barn full of pigs than have, not. It's a good thing to have. And also, building community is a big part of kind of where I see the need to happen, because certainly growing and producing anything is going to build community. And that's a big part of what I'm trying to do here through these videos and these live streams, is to help facilitate and to build some community, but also to encourage each one of you guys to think about ways that you can reach out to other people who are never going to see these videos and to participate in community on a very tangible level when it comes to trying to figure out how to get started. There's a lot of old farmers. And I mean, granted, I'm speaking maybe from somewhat of an insular perspective where I'm at, because I know that there's a lot of old guys around here that have farms that, you know, they don't want to sell them. They don't want to subdivide it and turn it into a, you know, an apartment complex or whatever. And some of them do. Some of them are just like, yeah, the hell with it. I'm going to Florida. I'm cashing my chips and have a nice day. But there's a lot of people that are still holding on to it. And you got to think, if there's somebody holding on to a farm that's not making money, well, why are they holding on to that farm? There's probably some attachment to the value of farming and the tradition and what has been built there. And if you are willing to engage and say, hey, you know what, like, can I help? Can I be part of this? Can I try to do a little bit of this and get the ball rolling? There is an opportunity to potentially have that as a step in the right direction. And I don't necessarily think that, you know, these are small steps, because ultimately there are bigger problems that are facing us as a nation and as a society. And I think that farming and being more connected as a community is a very important, very critical part of addressing those issues and those problems. And you can't get there from here. But the point is that giving up is not a better option. Just kind of sucking the life out of everybody and everything around you and saying, hey, I'm going to get mine, and by whatever means necessary, because all, you know, bets are off, and just ride the wave into the ground. That's not a good option, and that's guaranteed to lead somewhere suboptimal. But yet, as part of this adventure, like, if we look and say, okay, let's prepare for some opportunity that could come, I don't think that there is a downside to being prepared for an opportunity that could arise. Maybe it's going to be a different opportunity that's going to arise for you. Maybe it's an opportunity that's halfway across the country and somewhere else that you have to go for it. But preparing yourself for that opportunity so that when the opportunity presents itself and it arrives, you have something better to offer, other than, well, shit, I didn't think there was any point to any of this, because what the hell, everything's going to hell in a handcart, so why bother? And I just threw up my hands. Like, you don't know what's going to come your way. You don't know what is out there. Just because the opportunities are not apparent, the opportunities are there. But it starts with getting your mind set on doing something and preparing yourself and thinking that way and seeing that as a purpose that you have, which is the reason why I say, even if it's growing the tomatoes on your patio and that's what you have to do to start, do that and start. Because when you start to see yourself that way and you orient yourself that way and you begin to talk that way and think that way, it's just like when you buy a certain type of vehicle, you all of a sudden see everybody else driving that same vehicle. It just comes out of the woodwork, and oh boy, look at that. Everybody's got that same vehicle. Not because everybody all of a sudden has a vehicle, but you are more attuned to that thing because you are thinking in that direction, you are focused in that direction, and that's where you're directing your attention and your effort. And I think that a lot of that goes into all of this, not to be all like, woo-woo with the following your passion, because at the end of the day, it's hard work and suffering and uncertainty, but understanding that in the same way that, when you go in the military, you go to boot camp and they break you down and you have to do the push-ups and get up in the middle of the night and early in the morning and not eating the food you like and have blisters on your feet and get yelled at and all this other stuff. That's like, what does that have to do with anything? It's just suffering. And it's like, yeah, it's to get you to let go of your attachment to the things that you have in your old life so that you can be reshaped into something that's going to be different. And I can tell you, as somebody who has undergone that type of process in multiple instances, both like when I was younger as a type 1 diabetic, as a climber, having to learn how to get over like being a flatlander and attached to, not being dangling off of cliffs. And then as a farmer, having to learn how to deal with animals dying and I mean, that's one of the more obvious things, but weather that just kind of goes sideways and being stuck in situations where you have animals that are just like, yeah, you want us to go over here and do this? Well, we're actually going to go over there and do something totally different. And since your gates aren't strong enough, we're just going to kind of do what we want and have a nice day. Like having to adapt to that kind of thing, there's a lot of that it doesn't feel directly driven by purpose, but when you kind of get a little bit further down from that, when you make it through that and you can adapt and recover from that, you actually see that there was more to it than what was initially apparent, and that learning how to learn and learning how to adapt and roll with those punches, those are real important lessons and elements that build you up and make you ready for the next level, wherever and whatever that is, whether that's doing nothing but raising pigs, whether that's a little bit of pigs and a little bit of YouTube, or, whether it's, I don't know, everybody's got a different path. And I think that there's a lot of good stuff out there, and I refuse to accept a inherently negative perspective. And I think that on some level, like, there's a saying that you probably heard, both the man who says I can do it and I can't do it, both are correct. Both are 100% correct. And if you look at it and you have that mindset of I can do it and I'm just got to find a way, eventually you'll find a way to do something. And maybe it won't be exactly the way you thought you were going to do it, but you're going to get somewhere. And that somewhere is going to be a hell of a lot better than just, where you started out. But if you look at it and you just give up and say, the hell with it, well, that's never going to lead anywhere good, because even if an opportunity comes along, it's going to pass you by because you're not ready for it. So anyways, guys, that is roughly my take on some of this stuff. Like I said, I don't have an exact prescription for starting off farming, or what young men should be aiming at these days as such. But I think that it is important to understand the value in striving, the value in adventure, and learning to be okay with uncertain outcomes, because that uncertainty is where rewards ultimately grow. And you have to be willing to put yourself in uncertain situations where the reward is questionable. That's the only place that anything beneficial is going to come to you. The idea that, and I mean, I think a lot of it came from, like, I think my generation, the millennials, were kind of the last ones that had that, oh, just go to college for 4 years and you're going to get a corner office with a good job and health insurance and a pension and everything is going to be good. And then I got to college and it was like, oh yeah, nobody seems to care because everybody's got that level of education and nobody wants to hire you. So now what? You have to kind of figure it out. This is not, the situation that we are faced with is not really a complete deterioration into some, horrific new thing. I think it's really a closer return to the original state in which we have existed as people, without some of the padding on some of the sharp corners. And we have to be able and willing to deal with uncertainty and take a little bit more risk, because without the risk, there's not going to be any reward. But there still are people taking risks and reaping reward from doing that. So it's not hopeless. And I am more excited and more encouraged than ever about making America farmers again. And look, I'm struggling right now personally. Like, I'm struggling because I got piglets I got to get out of here. I got rats that chewed up the bottom of a feed bag, and a bunch of that bulk feed that I just bought is now all over the floor of the barn, and a lot of it probably is going to be ruined. You know, and then also having some animals that I have one pig that's got a bum leg. And of course, with weather coming and going here, we got some warm weather coming through. We got snow tonight and then warm weather for the next like 4 days. And anytime you have like that warm up and then the temperature drops back down, that tends to provoke respiratory issues. And if there's something kind of percolating under the surface, that usually will provoke it. And so I'm kind of just like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And meanwhile, I also have 20 piglets that probably 8 to 10 of them need to be castrated. Everybody needs ivermectin, and, you know, like 30-pound piglets, you can't really hold them with one hand and shoot them, you know, give them the ivermectin. With the other hand, you got to have an extra set of hands that's a little burly to get that done. And so, you know, that's all on my mind. So I don't say any of this stuff lightly, but it builds character, and I wouldn't have it any other way, you know. And if you agree or disagree, let me know. Drop me a comment. Those of you who are still here in the chat, I'm going to look and see, move some of this stuff around. How many people are, oh, we got 6 of you here. Yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I would love it if you join us so that we can keep this conversation going. I'm going to get better at managing the infrastructure here with the live streams so that I can be a little more professional and put together. You may have noticed I have my some of my pig decor that I added here. The bottom is a photograph, a portrait of my sweet baby Rosita. She was my first Tamworth gilt. She never made it to a sow. She died. But I did get her portrait, and that is, she's one of my favorite pigs. I'm a big fan of the Tamworths. They kind of, there's something about them that I just really love. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing more of these live streams, because again, it's something that I can do in between, kind of coming in from the barn, do a quick live stream, and you know, we will get going. Ian Harris, howdy, Ian. Good to see you here. I don't believe I have seen you here on the channel previously. Glad that you have joined us. And yeah, I like being able to do things that allow me to, you know, connect and kick around topics. I mean, being perfectly candid, I'd much rather spend an hour, excuse me, an hour on live stream with you guys than, you know, 5 hours editing. Ooh. And there goes my lung. You know, so there's, there we go. See, managed to mute that, I think. So I didn't have to cough in everybody's ear at least once. But we're getting better at managing some of this stuff. But I look forward to doing more live streams. I wish that I had a little bit more of a consistent schedule so I could tell you every such and such a day at such and such a time. I don't have that yet. What I can tell you, I would recommend, number one, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Enable notifications, because when I go live, at least that way you'll get the alert. And I try to post, posts, you know, in YouTube there. I've been doing more of that, so that way you get a little bit of a warning. I'll tell you, hey, I'm going live today or tomorrow or whatnot, so that there's a little bit. And normally I'm going to try to get the live stream set up and have it waiting so that you can kind of see that it's there. People can wait and kind of tune in before I get there, rather than just trying to make it right at the moment when I come in from the barn and want to go live. Ian says, just started watching, buying land in Middle Tennessee. Beautiful. Excited to do pasture-raised pigs for myself and the family. Well, Ian, consider me jealous. I am, although to be fair, when mud season comes around, you know, and some, I know Tennessee isn't necessarily, there's got to be some downsides to Middle Tennessee, but boy, this time of year, I would sure love to be in Middle Tennessee. Ian, are you in Tennessee currently, or are you moving to Middle Tennessee from somewhere else? Just curious. And pasture raised pigs, there's a lot of benefits there with doing pigs on pasture. I moved about 20 or so of my pigs. This is my first winter here in New Hampshire doing pastured pigs through the winter. And I got some porta huts and a bunch of hay, and they're out there figuring it out. They actually have access where they can come back to the barn, but they're staying out there, eating out there, and they seem to be okay with it. A couple of them are coughing a little bit tonight, so we'll see where that goes. But ultimately, they've been out there for the last week or so, and it's part of the deal. They got to get used to it, and we'll toughen them up a little bit. But yeah, the pasture is a lot of benefits to the pasture. Lot to that. Hello, Mike. And Mike's pigs are some of the ones that I got out there on the pasture right now. I got some beautiful little Berkshires from him, and those little piglets are doing great. They're fantastic. They're out there, so they're holding their own. I always feel, although it's warmer actually tonight, so I'm not super worried about that. But they're holding their own, and they're full of piss and vinegar, so we're doing all right out there with them. Ian says, I'm currently living in Denver. Mom moved to Tennessee, decided to move out to help her out. Oh, cool. So you got family out there. That'll be nice. Always nice having family. I think, generally speaking, I think it's nice to have family. I know we moved up here to New Hampshire, and that's been one of the hardest things because it's just my wife and I. We don't have any help. I mean, my friends here, they help a little bit with the with babysitting and with the kids. Like when we had to go to the hospital for the last baby that arrived, my son, we got some very helpful support. But it's just different because, like, if we were around our family, it's kind of like, oh yeah, just go over to cousins, mom, dad, brother, sister type of thing. And here it's just doesn't work that way. So that's cool that you can have that time with your mom. And yeah, Tennessee is beautiful. I really like Western Virginia. I have a friend. Actually, there's a lot of guys in that area that raise pigs. So I think you're probably in a really good area to have a lot of good help and support and some good mentors if you're looking to do pasture pigs out there, because there's some very knowledgeable folks and really good breeders as well. So I think that's a good place to be. I know New England, where I'm at, is kind of a little bit of a free-for-all, and but I think we're building the community of people who are trying to build better pigs up here. And in some ways, it's nice having it gives a gap in the market, because that means other people aren't doing it. So that's something that I have a chance to do. So all right, guys, on that note, I am going to close things out here because I got some youngins that I got to put to bed, and little family time that I need to have here. So I appreciate you guys taking the time. Again, if you're not subbed to the channel, I'd love to have you join us, enable notifications, and comment. Let me know kind of questions, stuff that you want to kick around and discuss, because a lot of the ideas that I get for things to talk about on here come from conversations that I want to have, or that I have based on questions that I get from you guys. And I want this community to grow around real, normal, valuable conversations that have to do with helping us get situated and get our farms going and growing, and stay positive out there, guys, and let's make America farmers again. Good night.